Give us the sign. Okay, folks, reflecting back on what we were talking about yesterday, or the last time we talked to you, I forgot to mention that in the Globetrotter situation, when we were fortunate enough to beat the Globetrotters, Abe Saperstein and the Globetrotters were so mad about it that they canceled the 2 further games that were supposed to be against NYU and Army in the East. And so that was one thing. And another thing, how we talked about these little things that might happen that affect things. There was another thing that it was brought to my mind by Edward, as a matter of fact. It was the night before the season was to open when we were seniors. That'd be in 1953.
We were headed over to speak at the Knights of Columbus.
We were invited to be speakers at the Knights of Columbus, and there we had our only one suit on apiece, and we're heading across, and it's raining like heck, and we get up to the corner at CMU, and turned the corner, and a car came around and it hit me. And fortunately, I got my hand on the hood, and I jumped, and the dang car hit me, and I flew in the air, and I came down on the hood of the car, and then I rolled off, and I'm in the middle of the road. If a car's been coming the other way, I'm a dead person. But anyway, the guy stops the car, and he jumps out, and he runs over, he says, "Are you dead? Are you dead?" And I said, "I don't think so." But anyway, we didn't have any time to change, so we went over to give the talk at the Knights of Columbus, and there was Ed all dolled up, and I looked like a big old rag doll. So little things happen that you don't take. But I want to tell you one thing that I got to get in before we go any further. I always had a fond liking for the violin. And the daughter Ann is here today, and I want to mention that way back one Christmas, under the tree was this large package. I opened it up, and what do you know? It was a rental violin. And a note that I had 2 months of lessons from David Carpolo, who was in the Cascade Symphony as a violinist, and in the Bellevue Philharmonic as a violist. So I was quite thrilled about this, and I go down to see David, and he said, have you ever played a musical instrument? I said, no. He said, do you read music? I said, no. He said, it's going to be very difficult to make a virtuoso out of you. He said, but we're going to try. So then he said, all you have to do is really know how to count to 1 and know the alphabet, because your notes are in eighths, quarters, fourths, halves, 3/4, and 1. He said, and the A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. He said, that, if you know that, he says, you got the basics. Then he says, all right, put your finger on the A string. He'll show me, and I put there, and he says, hold it down. And he had 3 little dogs. And he said, bring the bow across the string, which I did. And the 3 little dogs ran out of the room. And I said, you did that on purpose. And he said, no, they appreciate good music. But anyway, we had a great time, David and I used to take him to Itzhak Perlman when Itzhak was playing in town. And Itzhak's favorite encore song was The Dance of the Goblins, which is a hard piece to play on the violin. So one night as we were leaving, I said to David, I said, when am I going to play the dance of the violin? And he said, never in your lifetime. So that's how it happened. But one more thing, Ed, when you get in there.
I'll take the last 2 minutes.
We were up in Oliver, British Columbia when we were teaching classes in baseball. And we had one afternoon off, and I had brought my violin, and I was zipping down to go into our hotel room, or our room at Gitche Guma, remember that? And this woman was there on one of those layout things, and she said, oh, you play the violin? I said, yeah, but I'm not very good. So I went in the room, and I opened the window, and I had an Itzhak Perlman tape, a single. So I put it over by the window, and I put it on, and I let it go about 10 minutes, and I shut it off, and I got the violin, and I went out, and she said, you're very hard on yourself. You play very well. But anyway, that was just a thought, because I wanted to, have a thought. Edward, now what do you got?
I'll give you another thought on John and his violin. We have entertainment at the St. Patrick's Day party. And we call it entertainment, but it's like the Jack Benny show. And one day, John always in the kitchen preparing to get ready to play that evening. And while he was helping the fellows put the sausages together, he cut his finger. So it was bleeding profusely, so we wrapped it up a little bit and took him over to the nearest little clinic. And he gets it taped up and didn't need stitches. And the guy told him he was not to use the finger at all for 2 days, just stay away from it. So we had our party that night, and I made the following announcement. John Exec Perlman O'Brien will be unable to play tonight due to an injury to his string hand. It's the only standing ovation we've ever had at our picnic. Everybody just leaped to their feet and gave him a standing ovation.
Oh, yeah, and it was loud.
But John played it smart. He always brought somebody with him that could play. And after a while, they'd be playing along, and then he'd go and, get something in there. But we want to continue on today with what we started yesterday. Was kind of the history of where we've been, and we got through most of basketball and baseball at CIU, where we still have some left.
I got one more to throw in about basketball, and we'll probably remember some other later on, but between baseball seasons in about 1956-57, Ralph Malone called me, and he was the owner of West Side Ford in West Seattle, and he said, "Oh, I'm putting a basketball team into the AAU league this year, and I wish you would be the coach." And he promised me a couple of dollars, so I said, "Yeah, I'll do that." So I wound up with 11 guys, and half of them were guys that we had played with that were out of shape, and guys that couldn't make a college club, so we basically got a middle of the league team. Ralph calls me one day and he says, "I got another player for the team." I said, "No, you haven't." I said, "I got 11 players, 12 is too hard. I'm renting the Seattle U gym from Ed for $5 a night for practices." And I said, "Ralph, 11, if one don't show up, I can practice in scrimmage." And I said, "12's too many, I'm not going with 12. He said, "But this guy's good." I said, "I don't care if he's good or not." I said, "Who is it?" He said, "Elgin Baylor." I said, "Who the hell is Elgin Baylor?" He says, "He's a kid transferring from the University of Idaho to Seattle U. He said, "You gotta let him on the team." I said, "Ralph, I'm not going with 12 players." He said, "Well, when are you working out again?" I said, "Tonight." He said, "Can I send him down?" I said, "Yeah, send him down." So I get them all out in the court, and I look at Elch, and he's chewing gum and walking pretty good, looked all right. I said, "Start the layup drill." So Elch dribbles in, and he dunks the ball, two hands like this. And all of a sudden, I decided I could go with 12 players. And I was a hell of a coach that year. All I had to do was get Elch to the game and put air in the ball. And anyway, I didn't have him the next year, and I wasn't quite as good a coach, and I never could figure that out. But anyway, Edward, that's enough for me to start it. Why don't you take over for a moment now? And it'll probably be only a moment, but give it a shot.
There's another little story on John. We had a center named Bill Higlin. Bill was 6'6", had size 17 shoes, and played up till our junior year. He played with us. So we're over in Spokane. We're going to play Gonzaga. And Bill is a center. So before the game, I'm out there shooting shots, practicing my set shots and so forth. And I look next to me, and here's Bill Higlin standing next to me shooting shots. I said, "What are you doing out here?" He said, "Well, haven't you noticed?" He says, "I'm watching John." He said, "I always watch him before the game and see if he's hitting. And if he's hitting, I know I'm going to have an easy game." I said, "How's he doing tonight?" He says, "We're going to win." Which we did, of course. John, we got beat over there one time. This is the kind of teams we had. We're playing Gonzaga, and it's a close ball game. We get down, there's about 4 seconds left to go in the game, and we've got the ball, the score is tied. So we 12th time we were going to play for the last shot. And a lot of the plays that were set up for me at the end because everybody knew they were going to try and get the ball to John. So this one, of course, was set up for Ray Moscatel. And Raymond got the ball, dribbled twice, and with 1 second left, shot the ball up. It hit the rim and bounced off. And the whistle blew. Gonzaga takes the ball, runs down the court, and makes the basket. They give Gonzaga the basket. And so we lose the game by 2 points. I still remember I was standing up on a scorer's table yelling at the scorer. Father Lemieux was standing there with me. And they asked the official scorer, was it good or not? And he gave it to them. So we lost the ball.
He was a sophomore at Gonzaga, by the way.
That reminds me of a baseball story once. Gonzaga also too, but I'll get to the baseball story. But Brightman came in after the game and he chewed us out. And he said, the reason you lost wasn't the last play of the game, it's the way you played all during the game. He said, so show me something tomorrow night. Well, the next night, John got 51 points, and we beat him 109-60. So it was that type of team that we had down there, you know, talking about our basketball. But also in baseball, Gonzaga comes up. I'm coaching a baseball team at Seattle U. And we're going over to play Gonzaga. And there's a play at home plate. And guys definitely scored, one of my guys. And they call him out. So I was one that would, you know, get thrown out of a game now and then. So I went up, arguing. And finally I thought of something brilliant. I said to the umpire, I said, I want to tell you something. You should umpire ball games with your Gonzaga alumni jacket on. I got thrown out of that game. I got thrown out of a game before it ever started. We're playing Whitworth College over in Spokane, and we get up to the plate and you have to turn your scorecard in. And the game is not official until the umpire gets that scorecard. So before that, if say it's raining and they decide to come out, the home general manager has the right to call the game or not. Once the umpire gets the lineup card, then he's in charge of the game. And if there's a delay, it has to be at least an hour. So we get up there and I'm handing the card, and the guy says, we're playing with high school officials today. I said, we are not playing with high school officials. I said, did you look at that team over there? That's a college team. And over there, that's a college team. I said, we don't want to go on the field unless we get college umpires. Well, a big brouhaha came out of the thing. And the umpire turned to me and he said, you're out of here. Threw me out of the game. And I said, this shows you how high school umpires work. I said, I still got the scorecard in my hand. You can't throw me out of the game. He said, you're right. So I handed him the card. He said, all right, now you're out of the game. But the stories we have, you know, you look around this room and there's all kinds of memorabilia over the years and tons of it elsewhere. But I don't think enough credit was ever given at basketball to the guys that played with us, how good they were. When we got started as freshmen, we were just going along, not doing too well. And there was a fellow named Raymond Moscatel came out of Garfield High School in Seattle, 6'3", shooting forward, good defensive player. Never got the credit for how good he was. We had a fellow named Wayne Sanford. And I tell a story about John and Wayne Sanford. John, we all lived in a dormitory, Betts Hall, which was kind of like living outdoors. I told you yesterday how I threw John through the wall, and that's how flimsy the building was. It was an old army barracks. But we spent 4 years there as our home. John picked it up and, you know, away we went when he got selected room 1377 in Betts Hall, and that's where we lived. But Wayne Sanford was 6'4" at the highest. And he comes to John once and he said to John, and Wayne was black. He said to John, he says, I am having trouble with my girlfriend. I'm writing her letters, I'm doing this. And he's
Back in Denver.
back in Denver, he's from Denver. And he said, I don't know what to do. John says, you're looking at the best love letter writer in this building. Wayne says, well, what do you mean? He says, I will write to you give me the information and I will write to her and get things straightened out. So John writes a letter, a love letter to this guy.
Well, actually, I gave it back to Wayne.
Yeah, you gave it to him to write in his own handwriting after. So a couple of weeks go by and Wayne came in and he says, I don't know about you, Johnny. He says, apparently your love letters only work on white gals.
Never heard from her again. Let me jump in here, and I want to say something as a compliment to Ed that somewhat neglected when they gave a lot of notoriety to me. As you probably know, I scored 3,300 points at Seattle University. But most of those points came from passes from this guy right here. And in those days, they didn't keep statistics as much as they do now. So the recognition for that, it's never been really noted in the Seattle U statistics, how many assists Ed had when we were playing for Seattle University. And if they had kept careful count of that, they would find out that there's no one going to play 4 years rather than 3 and can get anywhere near what Ed did for me at Seattle University. And I've always been appreciative of that, and I even bought him coffee one day.
And I think we told you yesterday, in all these years we've been around, we've never given each other a present. Not so much as a single cigarette or a cigar. John used to smoke cigars, which will get me to a story a little bit later on. But we're through basketball at Seattle U and baseball, but I wanted to show you something. This is my rookie card, bubblegum card, when we signed with Pittsburgh, card number 249. But on it, and John didn't bring his, on the back of it is our batting records and fielding records at Seattle U for our junior year. We only played 3 years and then signed. And then our lifetime batting. And it's kind of interesting. I look at stats today, and here's what happened. The past year I played 29 games, lifetime 76 at Seattle U baseball. I was at bat 273 times. I scored 111 runs in that 270. I had 107 hits, 12 doubles, 6 triples, 15 home runs, 79 runs batted in, and a lifetime batting average of 392. I had 132 putouts in center field. I was always a center fielder. In fact, it's a big story with, we get into talking to Brant Trickey. Made 2 errors in 134 chances, fielded 987. And whenever, then when I went to the major leagues and the stats started to go the other way. So anybody said, how'd you do? I said, well, look on my rookie card. It'll tell you everything that happened there. But John was interesting. The last year we played was our junior year. And we were the only team that ever went to the NCAA baseball tournament from Seattle U. And there was a reason for it. We played freshmen. It seemed foolish to go a whole season with teams that were JV teams and weren't good teams, and waste all those games, and not get the chance just for the chance to go to a tournament for 3 games. So in other words, I'd get 28 games in on the JV team with kids playing freshman ball than I would have just playing the other way. So we played the freshmen who would not have been eligible for the NCAA. And we went down to California and we played Fresno State, 2 games. First game was a beautiful game. We lost it 2-1. The second game we got whacked because we had run out of pitchers, and John Kelly, who was supposed to start that game, came up with the flu. So we ended up finishing there. I'll give it back to John for something to say, and then we're going to get to how we ended up getting from Seattle University to professional baseball.
Actually, the going from basketball to baseball to the Pittsburgh Pirates has a lot to do with folks like Branch Rickey and Bing Crosby and those people that I think when Bing Crosby came to Seattle and talked to Ed and I about joining the Pirates, I think we kind of dismissed everybody else out of the picture because we said, if the Bing wants us, man, that's got to be it. And we became great friends. And Ed read a letter yesterday, but I just remember something. He used to send us a little something every Christmas from the 1953 season till the year he died. And I want to just show you this. I don't think but that's a paper clip he sent to Ed and I in 1953. And it's been in my pockets for 64 years now, or 61 years. And and it says Bing 53. I hope that's the end of the questions.
I gotta read the telegram. We're going to get into talking about Branch Rickey and Bing Crosby because they influenced us, and as I get into telling the story how we ended up with Pittsburgh. But this was a telegram sent to John and myself, who were in service at this time, from Branch Rickey. And this was 1955. Messrs. John and Edward O'Brien. I just learned of the death of your father. Everyone hereabouts joins me in extending to you and to your brothers and sisters our heartfelt sympathy in this hour of your bereavement. I recall the loss of my father a few years ago. He was very old, past 85. How does that sound?
Just a kid nowadays.
Yeah, nevertheless, his death was a great shock to me. I think I understand the sorrow you and your family are going through, and I just wanted you to know that I was thinking about you. It is good to know that all of you understand that the only source of comfort and consolation is above and beyond any words of mine or indeed anyone else. May the Spirit of the Heavenly Father be closely with you these days, Branch Rickey. It was a beautiful telegram.
He was a marvelous man. We'll get into him in a bit, but
I'll get into him right now. Because this goes along the same lines. Just recently, I got a letter from San Francisco area about a Bible that was presented by the Catholic players on the Pittsburgh Pirates in 1953 to Branch Rickey. And they wanted to know if we knew anything about it. Because inside the cover were the autographs of every one of the so-called Catholic players that were on the Pirates. And it was a Catholic Bible. And they wanted to know what we knew about it. So far, they've interviewed 15 of the players, and not a person can remember it. And it definitely was not a Catholic Bible because Cal Abrams was on it, and Cal was Jewish. Ralph Kiner was on it, he was Lutheran. And then all of the players were on there. And I got another letter just the other day. Terry said, you got a letter or a call on this Bible. And we have no idea how that was put together or who did it. So the mystery keeps playing itself out. But it's another story on Branch Rickey, and we'll get into him a little later. John, do you want me to tell him how we got to...
I want to tell the story of Rickey. I don't know how many of you have seen the movie 42. And that was about how Branch Rickey brought the first black player into the major leagues. And it was a good movie. They did a nice job of making Harrison Ford look like Branch Rickey, except for the jowls were a little... And Rickey had a deep voice, and he would always pull on his eyebrows when you were talking to him. And I thought that movie was pretty good about Jackie Robinson, but it didn't do enough on what Branch Rickey, the kind of person he really was. And I can recall, and Ed would too, that in I believe 1957, in spring training, we had spring training in Fort Myers, Florida. And at that time, the Deep South was still very racist. And so the black players on our club had to stay across the tracks on the other side and couldn't go into restaurants and all that. And Ricky went to the mayor of Fort Myers, and with his deep voice and tone, he said, "Mr. Mayor, let me tell you something. If my colored players don't have the same opportunities as my white players, being across the tracks in the hotels where they belong, or in the restaurants where they can be," he said, "the Pittsburgh Pirates will leave Fort Myers tomorrow morning and see what that does to your economy." The following morning, all the black players were allowed the same privileges as the white. Ricky was a totally beautiful man in regard to equality of all. And he told Ed and I, he said, "Boys, I have accomplished my goal, but I'm not a social line in Fort Myers, Florida." And so I always remembered what a great person he was. And of course, Father Lemieux was the president of Seattle University, and he came back a few times to see us play. And he and Ricky got together, and they just hit it like that. And Ricky told Ed and I we were very fortunate to have a friend like Father Lemieux. Edward?
Yeah, yesterday I spoke about Bing Crosby and how Bing came to visit us in Seattle on several occasions. In fact, we went, another occasion that happened, we went with Bill Fenton and our team, we went to California one year, and we always played basketball over the Christmas holidays. So we'd take a big trip, 4 or 5 days, or 4 or 5 games or so forth. So we're down in Los Angeles, and we got word that Ricky wanted, not Ricky, but Bing Crosby wanted to see John and myself. So Bill Fenton, Al Brightman, John and myself go over, and what he had done, his wife was an alcoholic. So what he had done on this St. John's Hospital there, he had put a wing on just for her. And he utilized it nowadays when he wanted to get away from everybody and just rest or take some days where he could accomplish some stuff. So we go over there, and he's in bed, just talking real casual like he was. And he said, "How many you got on your team here?" We said, "Well, there's 14 players, counting the manager and the coaches and so forth." He said, "You want to go to Rose Bowl?" I said, "What do you mean Rose Bowl?" He said, "Well, Iowa's playing Stanford or somebody, and if you want to go, I'll take your whole team to the Rose Bowl." So we said, "Of course we'd love to go to the Rose Bowl." And Bill Fenton, in his suave way, opens up his wallet and he says, "Oh, how much will that be, Bing?" And Bing says, "Willard, you idiot." He says, "I'm trying to recruit these 2 guys to Pittsburgh. Put your wallet away." So we all did go to the Rose Bowl as his guest. But he never forgot us. When we left the Pirates in '58, when I came back to Seattle U, and then John came back to Seattle in '60, every single year till he died in Spain, we got a Christmas gift and a Christmas card. And I've got 4 of his cards right here. I'll pass them around so you can look at his Christmas cards. Keep them, but pass them around and just take a look at Christmas cards that he and the wife, that's his second wife, Kathy. And he did that one day in Pittsburgh, or not in San Francisco when John came in. He specifically, I wasn't with the team, it was the Giants or the Phillies, I forget. And he specifically asked to have John come and visit with him and meet his new wife. So he stayed a friend, and truly what he promised us during the recruiting period, he never forgot. So, John, do we want to get to how we got to out of basketball into baseball?
Yeah, and if we forgot something, we'll bring it up later.
Yeah,
Just leave it be.
feel free to, ask questions. We can make an answer up.
Well,
All right, here's what happens. We are playing our senior year basketball at Seattle U. And we only went, a lot of people think we graduated in 1953. We graduated in 1955 because we went the first 11 quarters, and after the 11 quarters, we signed with Pittsburgh and did not go to the final spring quarter. We were taken into the Army for 21 months, so by the time we got back, 2 years had elapsed, So we finished off the three 5-hour courses we needed, and then went over to Father Lemieux's office and picked up our diploma. So it was a little gap in there, and we'll tell you what happened during that gap. So we get selected, and another thing, I don't know whether I tell you too much about it. The 4 years that we were at Seattle U, we went to a national tourney every single year. When we were freshmen, they had an AAU league that the freshman team played in, and the Buchanan Bakers were the big team up in Seattle at that time. And we played them out at Heck Edmondson Pavilion, and we beat them and we won the state AAU championship. And we're flown to Denver to play in the AAU tourney in Denver, which was a big tourney and I think is still going on today. We ended up playing, I don't know whether it was the Peoria Caterpillars or one of the good teams in there. And this is one of the maddest days I ever got in my life. We were 5 points ahead with about 3.5 minutes to go. And Bill Fenton, the coach, takes us out, thinking he's got the game won. And the other team came on and beat us. So I always remember that. The second year, we're sophomores. Finish the season, and we get invited to the National Catholic Invitation Tourney in Albany, New York. And that's one area where our dad did come up and see us play. And we lost in the finals to Iona College, but had a very good tourney. Now, John was the most valuable player in this tourney. Junior year, we got invited to the National Invitation Tournament in Madison Square Garden in New York. And lost to Holy Cross, and I think that's the memorable story that John told you yesterday about how Dad was out on the floor chewing us out for losing the ball game in front of his friends. And senior year now comes, and we get invited to the NCAA tourney. So we've gone to the AAU, the National Invitational Catholic, the NIT, and the NCAA. Well, we had to win first in the sub-regional. And the way it was played, you had regional games in those years, and 16 teams would all win. But sometimes you had to play a prelim to get in. So we get to play Idaho State, which was under Coach Steve Belko. I can still remember his name. And we're playing him, and end up we have to play out at Heck Edmondson Pavilion. Well, it was a very close game. John got 41 points, and we ended up beating him something like 85, 81 or something like that. But the most memorable thing about that game to me, I think I made the best pass I ever made in college basketball to him. It was late in the game, and it was pretty close. And I intercepted a pass and going down, and John always knew how to give me the ball for the last pass back. So, that got him up for a layup. So I got the ball, and there's one defender back, and he's cutting in from the side, John. And I can't get it to him this way, and I can't get it to him that way. So I threw the ball through the defender's legs to John for a layup. That got us into 83 to 81 lead. We went on to win the game. So our next game was Washington, which was ballyhooed. And this is how diplomatic the Jesuits can be. We had an invite to the NIT, and we had an invite to the NCAA, both tournaments. But we obviously could only go to one. So everybody wanted us to play Washington, but the players had a different attitude. And Bill Fenton said, we're going to let the players decide, they can vote. So we voted 13-1 to go to New York. We went to Corvallis, Oregon. Because they said, well, we'll look chicken if we don't go play Washington.
We wanted to go back and make up for losing to the year before the Holy Cross. That's what we were thinking of.
So we lost the game, lost it handily. Probably the worst defeat we had in school. And we had a good game plan. Bob Hoobriggs and John, and that's another story. In the history of Seattle Basketball College, there's only been one time where two persons made the first team All-American, every All-American team that year. John O'Brien and Bob Hoobriggs. So it was, it didn't have as much publicity because we were so far west. But Hoobriggs and John make it. And now we had to play for third place. So we played Wyoming, beat Wyoming rather handily. John led the tournament in scoring, was on the first team, all-tourney team. And now here we are, finished with our college ball. One thing I always loved about my college career as basketball, when we played Wyoming, there was a shot at the end of the game, and the shot missed, and I grabbed it and threw it in just as the buzzer went off. So it's kind of certain little memories that stick with you. Some memories don't stick at all. So now it's, what do we do with baseball? Now, I had been negotiating with John's help on a pro career, and it settled down. You could sign with anybody in those days. It settled down between not two major league teams, but a Pacific Coast League team and the Pittsburgh Pirates. And what we did is we did negotiating back and forth with, I forget the Rainier general manager.
Torrance in Seattle.
Torchy Torrance, yeah. Torchy Torrance in Seattle. And actually Branch Rickey in Pittsburgh. But there was a set of rules in those days that if you got over a certain amount of money for signing, you were called a bonus baby. And if you were a bonus baby, you had to stay with the team, the major league team, 2 years. Instead of 25 players, they allowed 28 on the rosters in those years. So the negotiations are going along, and then a snag hit. But what had happened, the bonus was in the 6,000 range. But they each kept bumping each other up. So now we get over 20,000, 25,000, somewhere in there. And the Rainiers came up with a very interesting thing. They were going to pay, they knew we had to go in service eventually. So they were going to pay us while we were in service. But if they did that, we would have been draft eligible by another team right after the first year. So we didn't want to sign the contract. And the second point is, they couldn't put it in writing. The bonus thing could not be in writing. So that made it kind of easy to sign with Pittsburgh. And the scenario, we'll get back to other stuff related to that, but the scenario was, we played Wyoming for third place, beat Wyoming to finish our college career. The next day, we flew back to Seattle. In the gymnasium, we signed with the Pittsburgh Pirates. The following day, Monday, we flew to New Jersey, spent a day with our dad, and the following night we were in Havana, Cuba playing baseball. And then we were, because we were bonus babies, we were able to stay with the club for 2 years, which helped us to a small pension that we get today.